Yep, today we're talking about Five Nights at Freddy's. Why not? So, Five Nights at Freddy's, the famous viral horror game. I don't know much about it. I know it was created by Scott Cawthorpe, or whatever his name is, and it was played initially by some famous YouTubers, thus propelling it into a viral sensation.
Okay, I get it.
However, much like other viral trends, Junko jeans and pet rocks come to mind. Five Nights at Freddy's is now almost entirely dead, to the point where their new game, Security Breach, was so unnotable and boring that it was around for like 2 weeks and then nobody talked about it anymore. Clearly, Mr. Cawthorpe cannot create the same sort of viral sensation, the same sort of smash hit he had all the way back when Five Nights at Freddy's 1 dropped. Today, I'm going to ask the question, was Five Nights at Freddy's ever really a competent video game series to begin with? Now, keep in mind, when I am talking about video games like Five Nights at Freddy's, which I classify in a new term I created, a new genre, because this is apparently a genre now, pizzeria horror. When I talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, I'm not talking about it from the perspective of gameplay, mechanics, anything like that. I'm not a gamer. However, I do think it's important to analyze video games from a storytelling perspective. How well can video games tell stories differently from movies, TV shows, or books, or comics for that matter? Well, Five Nights at Freddy's story, to put it bluntly, is fucking terrible. The only reason this video game ever got off the ground is because there's a shit ton of jump scares, and some nostalgic millennials were like, "Oh, I remember going to Chuck E. Cheese. What if Chuck E. Cheese's was scary?"
America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Smile, America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Food games and all kinds of creatures. While we take the pizza time theater.
Now you know me. I'm Gen Z. I've said that again and again. Some people have said I look like I'm 30 years old. I'm only 20. And I can say for a fact, growing up, I never went to Chuck E. Cheese's. Like, the thought just never crossed my mind. I was never like, yeah, you know where I want to go today? Chuck E. Cheese's. Because there's only like one Chuck E. Cheese's in Denver, I think. And miles out, like, it's not worth walking there, right? And I mean, it's not worth driving there even, it's so far out. I'm pretty sure Chuck E. Cheese's only really target like a more destitute and like economically demolished areas like Houston or whatnot, because there really is just like, there's just like one in Denver. But I guess down in Dallas or something, there's probably like 50, because they don't have any like real amusement parks or like fun spots to just like hang out. Here in Denver, that's really not the case. I mean, you know, you might ask, well, if you didn't go to Chuck E. Cheese's, Nick, then, you know, what's Denver got? Well, for one, there was this place on South Broadway. It's gone now, but it was called Fantastic Fun, and it was quite possibly like the greatest indoor amusement park ever. They had a ball pit, they had this giant trampoline, probably wasn't even safe, but they had this giant fucking trampoline. It was like 5 layers of trampolines. They had an entire Ferris wheel inside the building. Like, it was a Ferris wheel inside this giant warehouse, and they had this teacup ride, they had magic mirrors, they had a shadow show, they had a Ferris wheel, and like I said, a trampoline, a ball pit, a freaking... And this ball pit was way bigger than anything in a Chuck E. Cheese. It was like massive. It was like an ocean of balls. I went there for like 2 of my birthday parties, if I remember correctly, because, you know, it's locally owned. And it's just way more fun than I could ever get at a Chuck E. Cheese. Have you ever seen a Chuck E. Cheese with like an indoor Ferris wheel? To the best of my knowledge, Indoor Ferris wheels are kind of rare. The only other one is like, was it that Toys R Us thing in New York? I just never thought about Chuck E. Cheese because Denver has Lakeside Amusement Park, one of the greatest amusement parks in the country, a historic attraction with rides going all the way back 100 years, all of which are much more fun to ride than I could possibly get at any Chuck E. Cheese's. They got the Whip, they got the Matterhorn, they got the Cyclone, they got the Scrambler, they got the Tilt-A-Whirl, they got the Flippin' Ferris wheel, they got the Merry-Go-Round, they got the Heart Whip, they got the frickin' Zoom. They have rides for like anyone's tastes. And they have a fully stocked arcade, and pizza, and ice cream, and hamburgers, and ices, and snow cones.
Don't miss the big Memorial Weekend celebration at Lakeside.
So, yeah, as a youngster, as far as amusement went, I was never like, you know where I want to go? I would go to Chuck E. Cheese. Because there's just so many amusement parks and shit. You know, here in Denver, Lakeside's the best frickin' amusement park probably ever. Like, there's just so many fun rides and shit there. As far as arcades go, I've been to a ton. I've been to Oscar Blues Arcade in Lions. I've been to Lions Pinball. I've been to Hyperspace Arcade here in Denver. I've been to the Manitou Springs Arcade. So I'd say I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to arcades. And I can say for a fact that Chuck E. Cheese's arcade simply does not stack up. For one, they don't have any of the video games that people enjoy, like Donkey Kong or Pac-Man or Space Invaders. They literally just have machines where you put a token in and it falls down a slot or something, and then it dispenses tickets. And here in Denver, there was an arcade out in Aurora called Nickel-A-Play, where instead of using tokens, you just use nickels. Like you could get just as many tickets as you would at Chuck E. Cheese's or more for less money, just for like nickels, and every machine ran on nickels. And it was more fun because they also had pinball, which Chuck E. Cheese's does not have. You might notice that I speak as if I've been to a Chuck E. Cheese, and that's because I actually was. I was at a Chuck E. Cheese once, and it was for like a birthday party or something, and I was like 15 or something by this point, way too old for this crap. And like, it was the stupidest experience I've ever had. If I remember right, the animatronic didn't even come out, so I don't even know if like the animatronic thing exists anymore. There was like a TV with like a Chuck E. Cheese's show on it. Doesn't Chuck E. Cheese have like the remodeled CGI design now? He's not an animatronic anymore. Because I think, much like with Ronald McDonald, you know, Chuck E. Cheese's wants a rebrand.
Every kid's a winner all summer long at Chuck E. Cheese's. For a limited time, every kid gets a free game piece.
The main issue with Chuck E. Cheese is that their business model just sucks. An arcade slash pizzeria is a terrible idea from the ground up, because if I want to play video games or play pinball, I'll go to an arcade, and if I want pizza, I'll go to the fucking pizzeria and get a better pizza that's more delicious and well made. I've never been at like the arcade and been thinking, oh, you know where I'd really like to be? A pizzeria. Likewise, I've never been to a pizzeria and thought, you know where I'd really like to be right now? While I'm enjoying this delicious pizza? The arcade. By combining these two completely different business models that serve completely different purposes, Chuck E. Cheese diminishes the experience and value of both. This isn't to say I haven't been to a pizzeria where there's like a video game in the corner or a pinball machine, but it's not an arcade, it's a pizzeria. Its first function, first and foremost, is to serve up delicious pizza. And Chuck E. Cheese's pizza is so bad that when the pandemic started, they literally had to make a fake listing on the App Store for a fake pizza restaurant that doesn't exist, because nobody orders pizza from Chuck E. Cheese's. Their pizza is terrible, probably even worse than Domino's.
Put the pizza under the heat lamps in the service window and yell out your pizza time. 80 minute of pizza!
There are 100 better pizzerias in Denver right now than Chuck E. Cheese's could possibly provide. So right off the bat, Chuck E. Cheese's has a terrible business model. It is a shock to me that business even still exists. It was founded by Nolan Bushnell of Atari, and Atari has long since gone bankrupt. So I wonder how much longer this dinosaur from the 1980s can keep shambling along until kids eventually just, play video games at home and make their own pizza or order it from Grubhub or whatever. We really do not live in the age where Chuck E. Cheese's is a sustainable business model anymore. In addition, that wasn't even the case when I was a kid. Everyone is just playing Xbox and PlayStation. Nobody went to Chuck E. Cheese's to play video games because they didn't even have any video games.
Oh, let's forget about school today. Let's go to Chuck E. Cheese's instead.
It's a totally millennial thing, I have to assume. Only millennials went to this fucking Chuck E. Cheese's place, right? And not in Denver, there's only one Chuck E. Cheese in Denver, I'm pretty sure. And you could look on Google Maps, but I've only ever seen one. So I have to assume that's the only one. That's a quick recap of why Chuck E. Cheese's, for the most part, in this day and age, and really when it started off, is an irrelevant business. It is a useless business that serves no purpose because there's better places to have fun. At least, like I said, if you don't live in an area like Houston where they just have a bunch of Whataburgers all over. The problem with Five Nights at Freddy's is that from a storytelling perspective, again, not from a gameplay design element or anything, from a storytelling perspective, let's be honest here. How many of us have been inside a Chuck E. Cheese's? Ever. Not just when you're a kid. Ever. Who the fuck goes to Chuck E. Cheese's anymore? Now you might say that the appeal of Chuck E. Cheese's is nostalgia. I beg to differ, because
A new Italian pizza recipe with tons of mozzarella!
Even in the 80s and 90s, most people didn't go to Chuck E. Cheese's for a quality experience. You went there if you had a birthday party and you didn't live in an area where you could have a decent birthday party at a park or something. I genuinely feel sorry for anyone who had a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese's when they were a kid. I mean, for gosh sakes. That must be a really crummy birthday, because, terrible pizza and terrible arcade machines. The point is that Chuck E. Cheese's is really only used for birthdays, and it can't maintain a regular business model when it's only appealing to people 1 out of 365 days. So that's part of the issue. Five Nights at Freddy's is, in essence, the antithesis of relatable, because nobody goes to these fucking arcade/pizzeria conglomerates. Nolan Bushnell is often called, an innovator in the field because Chuck E. Cheese's is really the only establishment of its kind. It really is the only restaurant/arcade stupid enough to combine the mechanics of an arcade with the mechanics of a pizzeria.
Not robots, but figures that sing and dance, kind of an audio-tronics, and it's part of your Pizza Time Theater.
So, a series about this, entire industry with Fazbear's Entertainment or whatever is absurd. Nobody else would adopt this business model, and if they did, they would quickly go bankrupt, because only the founder of Atari, who literally has millions from, all the Atari games that got huge, would be able to keep a crappy business like this operating for this long. Now, like I said, there are plenty of other fun options that are locally owned and operated. One needs only to check them out. Up in Estes Park, they have a giant amusement park with arcade machines and pinball machines and a giant fun slide that's 5 different colors, and you zoom down, and man, it's a whole lot of fun. I've never seen a Chuck E. Cheese's with anything that cool. But again, there's not a single thing. I've been to Gateway Park in Boulder, I've been to Skate City here in Denver. There's no other business that offers pizza and arcade games. So the main thing with Five Nights at Freddy's, there's too many inconsistencies in it. First off, who the hell is going to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza or whatever, considering that the fucking animatronics look fucking terrible?
Johnny's my name, I'm hopping along.
Like, I have no idea how the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics looked. I have no point of reference, because when I went, it was just an empty stage and like a big flat screen TV over it. And I think it was people in costumes on the TV, I guess. I have no way of knowing. That was a weird day. I hope not to relive it. My point is that I have no reference for these animatronics. How they looked at Chuck E. Cheese. I know they look better than they do at Freddy Fazbear's in the Five Nights at Freddy's game. I would not go near these things. I would not go into the same building as these things. I wouldn't go get pizza here. I wouldn't even order pizza from here. Their pizza is probably disgusting.
Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, for kids it's #1.
Who the fuck is going to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza? The animatronics just suck. They look like they break down all the time. Now, part of the element of Five Nights at Freddy's from the Five Nights at Freddy's lore is, of course, that there's dead children inside the costumes. One question, how do they not smell, considering the rotting organs in there? Another question is, how the fuck isn't this restaurant sued literally to hell and back? Because you don't just have a bunch of missing children and shit and not get, like, lawsuits up the ass. Number 3, that's a stupid idea, right? And in the lore, it's like they wanted an animatronic that could also be a costume. Nobody needs that. You don't gotta have an animatronic that's also a costume, especially not for a shitty birthday restaurant that your kid only goes to 1 out of 365 days a year. Nobody's gonna give a shit if the costume and the animatronic are different. Nobody cares if Freddy Fazbear is real. Who gives a shit? It's a pizza restaurant.
I'm a real fun-loving guy.
No kid whines about Mickey Mouse not being real when they go to Disneyland. You know, so like, what's the point? Why make animatronic suits that clamp around people? Why? Why do that? You know, just don't do that, how about? Five Nights at Freddy's, of course, spans a large region of time from the 1970s to the 2020s. And I would have to say that it really only must appeal to millennials or the type of obnoxious 80s nostalgia Gen Xers who, you know, dress up in the Ghostbusters costumes and keep talking about how great the 80s were at every conceivable opportunity. Hey, you missed the 80s. You missed out on Ghostbusters. As if that's the only movie that came out during the 80s. I don't understand it, quite frankly. Five Nights at Freddy's, for what it's worth, has some decent graphic design and some decent voice acting. From what I've seen of the crappy, stupid, fucking garbage game, it has a decent look to it at the very least. I mean, sure, the security camera footage does not look like closed-circuit camera footage. Everything is obviously a video game, so that kind of brings you out of the tension and fear that the game is meant to build up. And of course, the jump scares are cringe to the max, as they say. Five Nights at Freddy's really pales in comparison to the ripoff, which is currently circulating around the internet. I thought that Five Nights at Freddy's had run out of steam, and it has indeed run out of steam, and that's why its competitor, the Walton Files, has come up from the abyss of the trash bin to replace it as quite possibly the worst entry in this genre that I'm calling pizzeria horror. So let's talk about the Walton Files, shall we?
Mom? Every afternoon when I came home and locked the door to my room, you thought I was doing homework. Well, I wasn't.
Walton Files is like Five Nights at Freddy's, except it's just a series of videos, so it's not even a video game, so you don't even get to experience the security guard simulation. It's literally just a bunch of videos and some guy showing off how good he is at 3D rendering. But he's not good at 3D rendering. He's not even good at aesthetic. Now, one thing I will say about the Five Nights at Freddy's games is that they are pretty good at creating tension. Scott Cawthorpe, or whatever his name is, clearly had at least some idea of how things looked and felt back in the 90s. I would not put it past him if he has been to a Chuck E. Cheese a couple times in his life. The Walton Files, on the other hand, is clearly made by someone with zero grasp on history.
Around this fun and magical journey we'll work on certain tasks.
As a bit of a graphic design nut myself, and a bit of a history buff as well, I take personal offense to any analog horror series that fails to genuinely look or feel like something out of the 80s or 90s, because that's the point of analog horror, to make the viewer believe that what they're viewing is in fact on a Betamax tape or VHS tape or the like. And while certainly a lot of analog horror series do fulfill this, Gemini Home Entertainment and Local 58 being, I would say, good examples of the analog horror genre, looking and feeling like authentically 90s and 80s things, albeit with a bit of visual editing that could not be possible without computer software. I'm at a loss for words when it comes to describing the Walton Files.
How odd. I remember we visited this room already.
It, along with the Mandela catalog, I would say, signal a sharp shift in analog horror into being just like purified cringe. The Mandela catalog is an entire other can of worms, but it is quite possibly one of the most gimmicky, trashy, tasteless, idealist series I have ever seen on YouTube, the website. Not just analog horror, but like I've seen zero budget sketch comedy shows on YouTube that take more effort and are better acted than the Mandela catalog.
Do you have your doors and windows locked, like what the broadcast told us to do?
Yeah, that's the weird part.
Number 15, Burger King foot lettuce.
Part of the problem with the Mandela catalog is that it is completely unimmersive. It does not even attempt to build atmosphere. The creator of the Mandela catalog, Alex Kister, the channel isn't even called the Mandela catalog. He literally just puts his name on it just to get him some free PR and clout. And that's part of the problem with, analog horror. It needs to retain anonymity. And when you're clearly just making these videos to further your own career as a digital effects artist or an animator, and you have like 50 other people all working for you to put together this schlock, and you list all their names, and you're like, yeah, this isn't real. I'm just making this so I can further my career in graphic design. It really ruins the magic, which is ironic considering that, Five Nights at Freddy's is about preserving the magic and the suspension of disbelief. Series like the Walton Files and the Mandela catalog sure do manage to completely suck you out of the magic and just be like, yeah, this isn't really a spooky VHS tape. I just made this. This is just for my college degree. And then I'm getting, and it has no artistic merit whatsoever. I don't create art for art's sake. I create art to further my own career as a graphic editor, to show off my VFX skills. Part of the problem with the Walton Files and the Mandela catalog is that they clearly just use shitty VHS filters. I've said this before, I think, but the only thing that can effectively replicate an actual VHS tape is a VHS tape. So if you're going to make an analog horror series, you will need to invest in some equipment, a VCR, a video capture card, an HDMI downscaler, and you're going to need to put in some effort. If you just use a VHS app on your phone, or a Snapchat filter that puts a little bit of static in front of things, it's not going to convince me. And like I said, to a trained eye such as myself, who's spent a long time, being a huge fan of the VHS format and really being a big fan of the analog horror genre because it brings back some of the excitement of finding a lost VHS tape. If it's just a VHS filter and I can tell that it is, that ruins the magic for me.
With the Bond's Burgers restaurant getting opened in a few weeks, we're looking forward to achieving this dream with you.
Like, sorry, it just does. Of course, these series are far from just using a VHS filter. There are so many other problems with these series. The Mandela catalog's name is a reference to the Mandela effect, one of the most overhyped and boring internet memes in recent memory. And the videos don't even have anything to do with the Mandela effect, so it just seems like it's trying to sound spooky without understand. Like, imagine if Nelson Mandela, the freaking president of South Africa, knew that his name was going to be used for this shitty analog horror series where some angel's face is replaced with a spooky clown makeup. He'd probably have something to say about that. And as for the Walton Files, unlike, like I said, Local 58 and Gemini Home Entertainment, which I really have nothing against because they do look somewhat convincing, at least at certain points. There are certain points I'm watching Local 58 where I go, yeah, this could be this could be an old TV station. It looks like it. Same with Gemini Home Entertainment. It really does look like, at least in some of the earlier videos, yeah, this could be an old VHS tape. I can buy this. The thing about Local 58 is it's really good at building atmosphere. On the About page, for instance, for Local 58, the text is spot on. It's really creepy, it's really atmospheric, it's good universe building. It manages to put you into the universe and be like, yes, this is an alternate reality. It's an alternate reality game, so it's an alternate reality. Local 58 is excellent at that. So the main problem with the Walton Files, then, is that not only is it about an experience going to an arcade pizzeria that very few people, especially my age, are likely to have experienced. It's a ripoff of Five Nights at Freddy's, a blatant ripoff, might I add. And just imagine that there's two entire franchises revolving around a fucking Chuck E. Cheese. This is an embarrassment not just to analog horror, but to all horror in general. For instance, the reason The Shining is such an effective masterpiece is because the Overlook Hotel, well, most people haven't been to the Overlook Hotel. In fact, nobody has because it's a set. Everyone has been to some building like that. Everyone has been to some large empty hotel or something, you know, a big empty building with all the lights on.
I'll say.
We can accommodate up to 300 people here very comfortably.
Or an industrial kitchen or a big closet like that, you know. Everyone's been to some place like the Overlook Hotel. It's a subconscious dreamscape.
I'm gonna try to get Danny down to Sidewinder.
Not only is it a very, like, subtle place, you know, it's a very, like, metaphysical place. You know, it's not entirely literal. You can identify with the people in it because you've been to some place like that. At some point or another, you've been to a hotel or to a building that's like a hotel. The problem with putting your horror story in a fucking arcade/pizzeria is that it's too specific. So right off the bat, your demographic is kind of reduced.
Now, last of all, we're gonna talk about how to top and bake a showbiz pizza time pizza.
Unlike, you know, just setting your thing in a haunted house, it's kind of like setting a horror series in like a tax office or something. You know, the horror at H&R Block. It's not going to be that relatable to anyone who does their taxes online or hasn't been to an H&R Block or just, you know, has an accountant and doesn't go to the tax offices themselves. You know, it's a very, like, specific place that not everyone goes to. and as a result, setting your horror story there isn't going to be the most relatable shit. The same goes for setting your thing in a type of business that was outdated in the 90s when home consoles were in use. Like, I've never heard someone who's an authentic fan of Chuck E. Cheese, the pizza, or the arcade machines, or like the experience. I've yet to see a Chuck E. Cheese fan. I'm convinced they really don't exist. There's probably more Burger King fans than Chuck E. Cheese fans.
Hot smokers, speed freaks.
Walton Files, much like its inspiration, contains a convoluted story of betrayal and revenge between the two owners of a pizzeria restaurant. At least that is from the analysis videos I've seen on it. It could possibly be something else, but these stories like being vague. So I'm pretty sure it's like some kids die and some maniacal guy owns the pizzeria arcade combination. I find it strange that both the Walton Files and Five Nights at Freddy's have characters who are the owners of a pizzeria / arcade and are also maniacal lunatics. Is this to imply that Nolan Bushnell is a crazed maniac? From what I can tell, he's a pretty level-headed guy, all things considered, but you would have to be kind of insane to run a business this fucking stupid.
Computer phobia, which is real, it has taken a certain scapegoat in the video game. A lot of people don't realize that video games are really the training wheels of computer literacy.
Particularly in the 80s when like arcades were all over the place. How'd Chuck E. Cheese think it could possibly compete when like there's an arcade on every corner and every kid has got Pac-Man fever and you've just got the ticket dispenser machines with the slots? And maybe it was different back in the 80s and they had more video games. They couldn't have possibly had as many video games as a locally owned and operated arcade, but, you know, to each their own, I suppose. The main problem with the Walton Files is not just that it's derivative of Five Nights at Freddy's to an embarrassing degree, but also that the person who made it, and I don't mean like to say that maybe they can't make something fantastic in the future, does not understand graphic design or the aesthetics of the given decades, or just like how to put together an image in general. The Photoshop is terrible.
In BSI, the most important thing to us isn't the money or the rating. The most important thing to us is that you have a wonderful experience while working with us.
All the graphics are like awful.
Opportunities appear, such as books, merch, animated movies. We even got a TV show.
Sure, Jan.
The text is of a font that did not exist in the 1970s, and it's clearly just downloaded with an editing software or something. I'm starting to think that people just don't know how the 70s or 80s or 90s looked, which is a shame because part of the appeal of analog horror, like I said, is recapturing, revisiting the past. And if you're not doing that, if you're not like accurately representing the past, then really what are you doing? The 3D renders of these terrible fucking animatronics who are even less appealing than Freddy and Foxy and Chica from Five Nights at Freddy's. There's a ringleader called Boozoo.
The sun has got his hat on. Hip, 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 hooray! The sun has got his hat on and he's coming out today.
I didn't make that up. That's an actual character in this terrible video series. All the animatronics are, of course, animated with 3D CGI, despite the fact that the human eye can easily distinguish between an actual animatronic, like in the music video for MGMT's Electric Feel, for instance, and a fake CGI 3D rendered animatronic. Even if, of course, these games and videos are meant to be set within like a cartoon universe, if a series set in the 1980s uses CGI that is more advanced than Toy Story, I'm really not going to buy it. I mean, CGI is a new fucking technology, and before Toy Story, there was like, you couldn't make a Freddy Fazbear cartoon that was 3D rendered in the 80s or the 70s. It's ridiculously terrible. I'm not one to demand that every analog horror series uses a camcorder to edit, or like, you know, some outdated piece of computer software that was only available on the Amiga or something. Like I said, that would strengthen the believability of it quite a bit if you went out and got a video toaster or something and went to work on that instead of putting everything together in Adobe Premiere or whatever. But all I really ask at the end of the day is that the still images and videos, when edited together, look somewhat convincing, or heck, that you at least transfer your video onto VHS and then back onto the computer. You know, just don't use a VHS filter. It looks terrible. It makes the computer editing incredibly obvious.
One last thing, try to get a good view of
The last thing you'd want in your Burger King burger is someone's foot fungus.
The Walton Files, of course, much like Gemini Home Entertainment, Gemini Home Entertainment added in a video game element halfway through that came out of nowhere, and it seemed like they were just trying to tack on their video game programming skills into the ARG, which completely ruined it for me when the video game came in. The Walton Files also has a video game, except this one isn't playable to the best of my knowledge. It's literally just a shitty Five Nights at Freddy minigame recreation with the terrible looking raster scan that doesn't look like a raster scan. I don't think the people who programmed these minigames have ever really looked at a video game monitor in their lives, or they'd be able to tell that it looks nothing like Donkey Kong or whatever.
Please try to be careful. The janitor told me these are hella expensive and delicate too. Oh, I see.
The Walton Files has a terrible fake video game. It has a terrible, just like freaking awful album, a tie-in album. They made a whole ass, they made 2 albums. If I'm remembering this correctly, yeah, there's 2 albums of just songs from the universe of the Walton Files that don't sound anything like the year they're supposed to be made, that don't adhere to the musical sensibilities of the time, and they're just like this Dreamhouse shit. You know, if you're gonna make a fake album that's supposedly from a given period of time, the least you could do is make it sound like it's from that period of time. Or otherwise, why assign a year to it at all? If you're trying to tell a story, the best way to do that is to make the story captivating and draw me into it and make me believe it. Sure, I know that animatronics aren't really alive. If you're good enough, you could make me believe otherwise. And the fact that nothing has been able to make me do that leads me to believe that this really is just a trend designed to capture the nostalgia of global millennials.
Yeah, remember, Chuck E. Cheese, please. It's the restaurant where a kid can be a kid.
And that's kind of sad, that we've stooped so low with analog horror. When analog horror started out, I thought it was a really cool trend, being a VHS fan and all. It seems like now the genre has kind of become a running joke, much like how people used to say vaporwave was dead. I think in a little while people will start saying analog horror is dead, at least until there's a renaissance and people will start becoming nostalgic for the early analog horror in the same way people now are nostalgic for the first vaporwave. It's interesting to watch these trends play out, but again, I think it is very important to be critical of these series if they are presented to us as works of art. ARGs are a wonderful new medium, and they can include a ton of shit. a ton of fascinating stuff. And really, if all you can do is put a video game in there...
I mean, that company has been pretty relevant these past few weeks.
You could put some comics in there, you could put a fake newspaper ad in there, you could put a fake newspaper article in there, you could put a fake magazine article in there. You could make real cassette tapes and drop them in some remote location and tell people online to go find them, to decipher your story, and they would, because that's the magic of the internet and the collaborative nature of it, the connection it provides. But if all we're doing is just pumping out these fake fucking video games and these terribly rendered CGI bunnies and shit, then I think it's kind of gone down the drain at this point. That's a real shame, because for a while it seemed as if it legitimately would be like the defining movement of a generation. It would be a truly Gen Z kind of, mode of expression. But, I mean, given that most of these series are made by Gen Zers running off the memories of millennials and largely supported by millennials, or Gen Zers who are too young to have ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese, and now all the Chuck E. Cheeses are closed down, and it's pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy at this point. I mean, it has to be, right? Man, maybe they should start programming their animatronics to kill people, and they could probably make more money from the entertainment value. As it is, Chuck E. Cheese's is fucking boring. Walton Files is one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen in terms of graphic design and video editing, and as an aspiring filmmaker myself, I am legitimately disappointed to see the direction that this has gone in. I have literally seen people who are such hardcore fans of the Walton Files that they act as if this is like the greatest analog horror series or something. It's so derivative and so clearly amateur hour that I struggle to see why anyone would give even a scrap of merit to the project. Again, I'm sure this guy has good intentions behind it, but like, they gotta make a new series or something, because the Walton Files is just embarrassing. Maybe it's just made for like 8-year-olds or something, and I'm sitting here and whining about how terrible Five Nights at Freddy's and Walton Files are, and how you shouldn't base your horror series around a pizzeria, and you should probably base it in like a hotel or, something.
Go check it out.
But, maybe these young people who consume this type of amateur swill are honestly too young to find anything other than the only place they've ever been in, a pizzeria arcade. I mean, they just don't have the capacity or like worldview to comprehend anywhere else is like scary. They're just like, oh yeah, Chuck E. Cheese's. That place is nightmare fuel, because my parents take me there every weekend and I play the arcade machines and I watch Chuck E. Cheese, the rascal rat, as he brings out the pizza. This generation has probably never tasted better pizza. That's a disturbing thought. That should be the plot of the next analog horror video series or video game franchise or whatever. That pizzeria arcades are just a terrible business model and provide an inferior service and bad pizza. You could just have one frame of a Chuck E. Cheese's pizza, and that'd be enough to scare the living daylights out of me.
Another pizza by Pasquale, with a lot of help from you, of course.
It's terrible pizza. Not only am I an arcade connoisseur, of course, I also have a large respect for the Italian cuisine, and pizza is something I will not tolerate the butchering of. Pizza needs to be done right.
But I found out how to tell the beautiful people from the phonies.
Even if the Walton Files fails at telling a coherent story or being a coherent narrative in any way, it is at least indicative of the times we live in and the kind of nostalgia-soaked sadness that we're currently going through. As I've said, if you're a fan of analog horror, there are plenty of series that I would consider pretty competent. Local 58, Gemini Home Entertainment. I've heard about one recently called Hypnagogic Archive. I wonder what that's about, but you can check that out. All I know is that the Mandela Catalog and the Walton Files collectively are responsible for the sanitization and degradation of the analog horror genre, and as such, should be considered poor examples of the medium and not indicative of the thing as a whole, because there are plenty of small analog horror series and ARGs that really struggle to get off the ground but have untapped potential. And when I see anyone in a comment section just going, Walton Files is the best, talk about Walton Files all the way, I'm like, you know, there's so many other videos out there. Diversify your tastes, try new things, try cool new shit. That's the point of life, is to take risks and take the plunge and try new things. Just the other day I listened to an entire Beck album, and I don't know what to say about that. One new thing you should not try, however, is Chuck E. Cheese. If you've never been to a Chuck E. Cheese, don't try going down there. It's not worth the experience.
All kinds of topics for a hungry balla!
Yeah, those are my thoughts on the Walton Files, really. It's a disappointing embarrassment, a debacle, a complete sham, and like, I am just dumbfounded how anyone could think this is even remotely scary, even remotely competent. It's like a parody of analog horror. It's so poorly constructed, you'd think it was trying to call out the tropes of the genre by being this terrible Five Nights at Freddy's recreation, but I guess some people legitimately do think it is some kind of hidden masterpiece or something, which it absolutely is not. I'm honored to be one of the first critics of this genre, this new medium. You know, it needs criticism, it needs public inquiry, it needs analysis, it needs to be broken down, and you can't always just compliment everything that comes out. And I understand that analog horror is new, so of course, as a new genre, it's going to not have much critical analysis or thought applied to it in the vein of storytelling, but I'm all too happy to provide that service and help the genre along, help the medium along. Hopefully it can evolve into something admirable. And maybe the next one, maybe the next big analog horror series will be something admirable. I hear this Hypnagogic Archive series is pretty good and uses real VHS tapes. That said, what are your thoughts on the Walton Files? What are your thoughts on immersive horror? What are your thoughts on ARGs or web series or anything of that sort? I think the storytelling capacity of the internet is fascinating myself, and while I certainly don't buy into fads or trends like Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't know if I would even consider analog horror a trend. I think it is here to stay, and I for one just hope that whatever comes out next is really something fantastic. That'll do it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Sayonara, suckers.
Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Food and games and all kinds of creatures. For a taste of pizza time theater. Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese. You can smile.
I believe you're in outer space. Throw a party at Chuck E.'s place.
You can smile.
Watch the gang go wild. So much fun you can't help but smile. You can smile.
Chuck E. Cheese. Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese. Food and games and all kinds of creatures. For a taste of pizza time theater. You can smile America. Smile America. Smile America, say Chuck E. Cheese.
Now we're gonna bake the pizza. This is my favorite part. I can hardly wait until it comes out the other end of the oven.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.